is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Deadwood, Season 1, Episode 5, The Trial of Jack McCall. In this episode, shit has really hit the fan for a lot of people, and nobody is happy with how things are turning out. This isn't... I kind of wondered if the death of Wild Bill Hickok was going to benefit anyone, and it does not seem to have done that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Patrick for commissioning this episode and the episodes coming up. This was one of those, so I'm noticing with certain stories, and I really want to stress with certain quality stories, that there is a rhythm to the way in which things are handled. So you'll have, for example, in the Dresden Files, I'm choosing to cover those books in a clump of 3 chapters at a time because that's how the rhythm of the story is. We'll have 3 chapters of sort of setup, 3 chapters of big action, or at least some action, and then 3 chapters of cool down and consequences of those actions, and then 3 chapters of setup for the next round of action again. And I'm beginning to sense that that's how Deadwood rolls as well. We'll have a bunch of action, and then we'll have a lot of, if not consequences, at least, people's discussions of what they think or can gain from the action of the previous episode. And then we'll have another episode of action once people have kind of decided on a course. And then the next episode will be the consequences of them following through and on whatever they decided. And this episode is the consequences of several decisions that people have made. So, let's start talking about this. We open up with one of the more honest and disturbing things that I feel like this show has done. This show has not pulled any punches regarding the racism or the misogyny or the myriad number of other belief systems and oppressions that people experienced during this era, and certainly would have experienced an even more amount, in a concentrated amount in a place like this where there is no fear of the law. However, I feel like they're really embracing it. And I don't mean embracing in a derogatory way, like they're enjoying it. I feel like they're really trying to point out the barbarism, in a way that's this is something that I've always had a problem with, and it's something that's unavoidable, I feel like, in when you create any sort of work and you decide to release it to the public, you then have to sort of let go of how the public decides to interpret it and what they decide to do with it and take away from it. And something like The Sopranos, for example, The Sopranos is an amazing story and great acting and just a beautifully crafted television show. I will not gainsay that at all. However, there are these people who seem to think of it as an aspirational sort of thing. Like, they wish they could be gangsters. They wish that they could be this tough. They wish that they could be this powerful. And for me, watching The Sopranos, it was like an indictment of being a gangster. It was pointing out how small and petty all of these men really are. That they may be intimidating and powerful in the grand scheme, but when you look at them as people, they are not only not to be admired, but probably in a greater sense, less impressive than the average person. And the fact that they have so little to speak to their good qualities is part of what has led them down these paths. But then you have people who watch those shows and do not take that away and want to be like Tony Soprano, who, you know, is not a good person and is not even like a strong person in a lot of ways, which is what people seem to admire about him. So I feel like this show is really trying to sort of like show us how successful people in this era became successful, and do it in a way that is an indictment a little bit, rather than a tacit endorsement or making it seem glamorous. And I have respect for that. I feel like that's a hard thing to do without becoming preachy. And I feel like the show is trying to walk this line that is difficult and not something that you really see a lot when you're dealing with media that is like aimed at primarily, for example, in this, a white population, because we don't see many people of color in this show so far. We have the Chinese guy who, for all we know, isn't even Chinese. They call him that. He could be Vietnamese. He could be Korean, you know, but like they don't seem to really distinguish. And all we've ever seen is people being like racist or dismissive toward him. And he's used as a means of like getting rid of bodies because he owns some pigs. And other than that, we've got like vague Native American presence, and we've never even seen one of them on the show. So the first time we actually see any indicator that they're even there is some man riding into town holding one of their heads by its hair and swinging it around. Well, this episode starts out with them hawking tufts of hair from the head of this man. I assume a man. Not sure, but I assume. And there's a fucking line. Like, people are buying these tufts of hair off a human head to include in letters to, like, send to people. And I know that this is a real thing that happened. I've read plenty about this. But it is a very different thing to read about it in a hypothetical sense than it is to be placed in a setting with what feels like ordinary people, and there is somebody hawking it out loud in like the town square as if he were selling cookies or, you know, rakes or shovels or something. The normalization of it and the utter unsurprise of anybody who is around it makes it all the more chilling to me how completely dehumanized Native Americans were for these people. They were treated as animals to be skinned and for their skins to be sold. It was not like they were people in any sense. And that is incredibly disturbing to see played out here in this very like purposeful way. And the fact that the show doesn't show us anybody buying them. This guy is out here hawking his wares, in quotes, in the background of people coming up to Wild Bill and paying respect to him, is a really like fucked up and beautiful way to juxtapose how little regard a Native American was treated with versus how much regard a white male murderer was treated with. Wild Bill, I don't think was like a bad person as much as I can tell, but to be honest, I don't really know very much about him. And he seemed to be somewhat gentle to his friends and to people that like didn't cause him, didn't provoke him. But was he wildly racist? And was he out here killing Native Americans? Maybe. I don't know, and I haven't looked up much about him because I'm afraid of spoilers, because things you just pop up when you don't expect. So this guy is over here being revered by an entire town. There's a line of folks waiting to come and see his corpse and pay their respects, while another human being's head has been sheared and the hair is being sold as trophies so that folks can write to their family back home and send this tuft and pretend they killed the guy, because they'd be proud of that, and so would their family. It's so fucked up. And there's no way the show isn't juxtaposing the way these two bodies are being treated on purpose. It's absolutely got to be, so it's just really gross and really sad. And it comes up again later that this head was brought in as a bounty because of I don't want to say anonymous, but we didn't see Al put forth the bounty and announce to people that he'd be willing to pay $50 for a head. I don't know why he wants $50 for a head, what he's exactly trying to do here, but he wants to keep them. And while this dude's out here selling these tufts of hair on the street, Al is planning on doing something with this head. Not excited about this. I don't like the fact that Al is putting a $50 bounty out in the first place. I'm not a fan of this. Just that. But then what is he going to fucking do with it? And we don't find out by the end of the episode. And I am not excited about finding out. I don't want to know. Frankly, I just don't. Is he going to have it fucking taxidermied and hung on the wall like a fucking buck that somebody shot? That's bad enough when it's an animal. I never understood that. The only thing I can understand is hanging on to a rack of antlers or something. But having the whole head taxidermied so that its glassy eyes are staring at you has always been a fucking mystery to me. And moving to Texas is just... You guys don't even know how many dead animals are in all the buildings down here. It's insanity. But doing that with a human head, what the fuck, Al? Okay. So I'm hooked on this part a little bit. I'm sorry, and I'm going to be spending too much time talking about this. Let us begin to talk about the fact that they are also gathering up people to have a trial for Jack McCall. And what they're doing is they are collecting jury members and jury officials, which I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. But I'm going to read this subtitle here because I have the captions on. Let's see. Who'd be there to gainsay you? Everybody's standing in line to pay homage. And then let's see. Only those admitted to the bar may join the line of candidates for officers of the court. And I don't know what that means. Jurors will be drawn from the hat on my right. Officers of the court in the box on my left. I don't really know what they do. I have no say in either outcome, so please don't try to bribe me, which I enjoy. And then we go to Al and Cy, who are watching this guy and talking amongst themselves. Now, I have to say, I am enjoying the dynamic between Al and Cy a lot. Much more than I expected. I thought they'd be at each other's throats more because they are in competition with each other. But there is, I don't want to say a truce because it's certainly not true. That's making it sound like Al is going to be a lot more passive than he is. However, there is a sort of camaraderie and understanding between the two of them that I did not foresee. Because I hadn't really gotten the measure of Cy himself. I understood who Al was, pretty quickly. But Cy, I wasn't sure where he stood on most things. And the difference between the two of them standing next to each other, too. I'm going to take a screenshot right here. And I might use this as the image for this episode. But we have Al, who is standing there in a fucking, pinstriped suit. But it's not brand new or anything. and he has one of the like buttons of his vest. They're all buttoned except one, like he missed it. It doesn't look like he's even wearing a shirt under the vest. It's a mess. And then we have Sai standing next to him with this like crisp as fuck gray suit with black edging, this spotless top hat. The looks of the two of them really are representative of the businesses that they run. And I love when he's like talking about how he wishes that he could just, because he's asking Sai, how is your business going? And Sai is like, well, the craps tables have taken a little bit longer to catch on than we expected. And Al is like, well, that's how it is around here. They're not good with new stuff. It'll catch on eventually, but it takes a while, and you kind of have to bash them over the head with it. And then he says, I wish that we could just kill them and dump their bodies upriver and rob them. And Sai gives him this look like Al just said everything that's in his heart, but he can't possibly admit this. So he just gives him this like little smile and goes, but Al, that would be wrong. In this way that I fucking almost died. He is so like deadpan about it the whole way this is going down. Meanwhile, he's looking into the window, and across the street is Alma, and she is wondering where the fuck Jane has got to, because now she's got this little girl to deal with. And so I'm going to say this. Alma is real mean to the doctor, who, if she only knew what a decent man he is, I think she would treat more gently. But the fact that he called her out on her addiction, the fact that he refuses to, like, accuse anybody of murder, all of this has led her to believe that he's a coward. When in fact, I think, as we have seen as viewers, he's doing literally as much as it is within his power to do to resist the bullshit that is happening in this camp and fight against it. And he's like really good at it. He uses the power that he has as the one doctor in camp to wield some respect and favors from people. But she doesn't know that. All she's seen of him is what she's seen of him, and she feels like he's complicit in everything. And I really understand from her perspective why it looks that way. And, you know, the fact that he doesn't want to be like, well, obviously he was murdered. I understand her frustration there, but also, like, she's got to think, what possible good could come of him saying, yes, your husband was murdered? There's no proof, there's no anything, you know? Even if he said that, that's nothing. And so she's just kind of resorted to, like, berating him in a really self-righteous, indignant sort of way. And I have to admit, I find it amusing because she's just a fucking bamf, but she is, like, so neutered here as a woman with no backup. The one man who sort of had her back for a while has been fucking shot. And Jane, who she was seeing as a friend, I think, has disappeared. She's been abandoned like twice now, right? Like, her fucking patience is running a little thin. The doctor tries to give her more laudanum, and she won't hear of it. She's just like, I'm not interested in staying on this shit. He's like, I don't feel like this is a great time for you to, like, stop taking it. And she responds just basically with like, oh, really? You're giving me your professional opinion. How new, how novel. Meanwhile, this little girl, she's convinced like, oh, I can't take care of her. I can't manage it. And I'm like, yeah, but you can, though. You're in a perfect position to manage it right now. You have literally nothing else to do but stalk around inside your rooms and be angry and frightened and frustrated. So, yeah, maybe this kid is a great distraction for you. But I think she's, like, worried about being essentially in DT while she's working with this kid, you know, and this child being vulnerable because she's potentially been brought down because of it. So then let's go to fucking Seth. Seth is not impressed with this man selling hanks of human hair right outside of his business. He does not like this. First of all, the type of business, I think, is a problem, but the fact that it's so close to his is also a problem. He literally takes the stick that the guy is carrying with the hair hanging from it, breaks it in half, and throws it in a fire, which made me want to kiss him on the mouth. And then he goes over and yells at Leon, I think is his name, Leon. Or no, Leon's the actor. Tom. Tom is the name of the guy. Because I think he thinks that Tom is charging people to come and see Bill Hickok's body. To be honest, I also thought that. I assumed that. But it turns out that he's not. He's saying people just want to pay their respects. And Seth is so mad. Like, I think he's mad here, to be honest, because there's not really a good reason to yell at Tom once he realizes that Tom isn't charging. He just has to walk away and leave it. And he's like disgusted by it. Obviously Seth is really dealing with some unrequited rage. And I am very curious how things have gone down by the end of this episode, because we don't actually see what happened. We can guess, but other than the fact that he shows up to take that bag, we don't have any evidence. So I don't know. Patrick's here. Hi, Patrick. Al said in the first episode that he would pay for Indian heads. Oh, he did. You're right. Back in the first episode when everybody's starting to get riled up. You're right. I forgot about that. It was when he was trying to keep people in the gem and not go after the heathens who murdered the family until the next day. I forgot about that. Thank you, Patrick. So this fucking deal with Seth. I'm gonna talk about Seth before I talk about what's going on with the trial, because I sort of wondered if Seth wasn't going to attempt to be on the trial, like in the jury, and it does not appear that he has the slightest bit of interest in that, which is interesting to me because he seemed like a man of the law. But it seems like at this point, he's kind of abandoning that. And I'm curious whether or not that is because he has come someplace that he knows that this is sort of like a farce because there's no official law in place. Or if because he just assumes everyone saw this man walk in and shoot the guy. There's no reason for me to need to be on that jury. We all know he fucking did it and he's confessed to it. But he's outside, and this is when the doc comes up to him and was like, hey, you need to sign that proxy because she really needs to leave town. And the doctor is kind of insulted. I feel like he's trying to do what he can to help this woman not fucking wind up dead, and nobody is appreciating this. The doc is honestly, at this point, my favorite character in the show, because he's got like the purest heart and intentions of everyone, and nobody fucking cares. But he's doing it anyway. This is not for anybody but himself, that he's just fucking trying to do the right thing. And I am 1,000% here for somebody who is willing to make trouble simply because they know it's the right thing to do, versus somebody like Seth, who, while I think he cares about what the right thing to do is, Seth also just, as Sai says, has a powerful temper. And I feel like Seth is a little bit more at the mercy of that than he is at the desire to, at the moral imperative to do the right thing. But yeah, they just sort of stare each other down here, and I was just like, oh, Seth, you need to fucking calm yourself. So he goes and meets with the widow, signs the proxy, the whole thing, and she tells him about how I saw you support Bill in a gunfight. And the way that she phrases this, Alma is so good. I just fucking love her so much. She phrases this as, I saw you from my window support each other in a gunfight. She doesn't say, I saw you two shoot down that motherfucker. She's not like, I witnessed a murder. She frames it as two friends helping each other to do something. And the something is quite nebulous. It's a gunfight, but we're not going to talk about the man who's dead. We're not going to talk about the pulling of the triggers. And then, from the way he spoke of you so highly later, I suspected that you were that man. In essence, being like, Bill really liked you, and I had a suspicion that you were that man because of the way I saw you two working together. Basically, I don't know if she appreciates the full effect her words have on Seth in this moment, but I feel like that tugged on his heartstrings pretty fucking hard. He seems to be momentarily speechless when she says that to him, and it is kind of a beautiful moment where he is reminded again of what he has lost, while also being reminded of what he owes his friend and that he agreed to help this woman. So yeah, it's pretty good. And I have to mention also that E.B. Farnham pottering around in this scene in the background because he was hoping that the widow would just take his offer. But it turns out that she's going to get a proxy to deal with this for her. And she is going to be more of a pain in the ass than anybody wants. Yeah, this whole thing is so like layered with reactions and emotional weight and things. I just really, really enjoyed how it all plays out. And the guy who plays E.B. Farnham is so perfectly cast as this fucking like weasel who is smart. There's a fucking reason that he's doing what he's doing here. And like, as much as he's not in the position of power as Al is, he still makes use of what he's got. But him scuttling around in the background with his like overly embroidered and lacy shirts that are like dirty and gross. It's just so perfect. This whole thing. So EB goes and talks to Al about this and is like, so turns out, while Bill made Bullock the widow's proxy before he left, like he set this up. And of course, Al is disgusted and is just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I thought he was on my side. And even now that he's dead, it's not like it's profiting me anything because he set this shit up before he even died. So great. But then EB has a plan, and I have to fucking give him some props for this because, like, pretty good plan. What he does is he points out the widow is an addict. She's trying to come off the drugs, which is part of why she's signing over her proxy because she's overwhelmed, not trusting her instincts. Maybe if she were high again, she would be a little bit more, like, agreeable. So what they decide to do is they're going to send Trixie to her and pretend that Trixie is there to care for the little girl and offer a helping hand when in fact Trixie is there to get her hooked on laudanum again. Trixie, however, has other plans because Trixie is an ex-addict herself and knows what it means to try and come down off this shit, does not wish it on anyone, and decides that she's gonna fucking help this woman after all, which I can only imagine is going to end up getting her beat all to hell because there's no way that Al doesn't find out that she didn't give this woman the laudanum she was supposed to give her. Or what else is it? Maybe it was something stronger than laudanum. I don't even remember what it is that Al hands to her. In any case, Trixie does not do that, and she goes to the doctor and gets the ingredients from him for a tea that will help the widow through the worst patches of the detoxification process. Because apparently you like end up with cramps and things like this. So yeah, I can't tell y'all how much I admire Trixie. Like, I am not somebody who enjoys pain. I am not somebody who is brave in the face of pain. I have always said that, like, if somebody captured me to question me about something and they were going to torture me, I would tell them everything immediately. I can't handle that kind of shit. Even the threat of it makes me, like, go clammy and pale. Trixie is in a position where she gets beat up by customers. She gets beat up by Al. Anything she fucking does, she's in constant danger. And she knows, she has to know, it's inevitable that Al will figure out that she didn't hold up her end of what she was supposed to do here. And she's doing it anyway because she is trying to be good to another woman for the sake of that woman. And that's all. And that is really admirable and incredibly self-sacrificing. And damn, Trixie, okay, you're pretty awesome. Also, she's taking care of this little girl in a very tender way. And that is also, like, I'm not one for kids, like, in terms of wanting my own. But when I'm around kids, I'm shockingly good with them. I always surprise myself because I think I don't like kids. And then I'm around them and I'm like, no, this is rad. In doses, I should definitely say. But the whole way that she's handling this, I just never thought, I don't want to say never thought that she'd have this kind of backbone because I feel like that's really harsh. But I guess that is what it comes down to. I just didn't think that she would have the guts to go against Al in such an obvious way. And it just goes to show that everybody in this show is fucking afraid of Al for fucking good reason. And she has more reason than most to be afraid. And she's not going to let that dictate what she does. And that's just kind of amazing to me. So, all right. I'm going to go back to Seth here. Seth is really not... I feel bad. Okay. So the Reverend Smith. This Reverend, I love. I think it's a really tough thing to represent someone who is an official for any sort of religion and not have them come across as incredibly corny, incredibly annoying, or downright self-righteous in a way that's like off-putting. And this Reverend has struck the most beautiful balance of being just pushy enough that it feels like he's still doing what he's supposed to be doing with dealing with the kind of men he's dealing with every day, while also being humble enough about it in a genuine way that I really feel like he believes everything that he is saying. He is a true believer. He has not got any cynicism in him about his religion. His cynicism is about the people around him and how they decide to handle themselves. And it's just enough cynicism for him to like get to the heart of matters without ruining his faith. And I have to admit, the way he is poking and prodding at Seth is really fucking amusing to me, because Seth wants nothing more than for this man of God to get the fuck out of his face, because he is so angry at what happened to his friend, and, you know, and with good reason. And he kind of wants the space for that rage and desire for vengeance. And this man is ruining it for him by making it about Bill's life and honoring him and going to heaven and praying for his soul and everything that he should, in quotes, be concerned about right now if this man was really his friend. But he's a little bit too focused on other things. And he knows that, I think. So this first scene, the Reverend comes to Seth and asks, like, what hymn they should sing for the funeral. I love the fact that in the background here, we have Saul, who is the Jewish man, having to explain to Seth that How Firm the Foundation is the hymn that the Reverend wants to sing. Because when he says How Firm the Foundation, Seth just gives him a look like, what are you talking about? And he has to explain it. And he just says, yeah, I think that'd be good, in an effort to get rid of this guy. And then the Gospel, Corinthians 12, he's following him. And I'm going to read this because, like, I want to absorb it as I read it to you in a way that I maybe didn't when I was watching. If the foot shall say, because I am not the hand, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear shall say, because I'm not the eye, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not the body? Now hath God set the members, every one of them, in the body as it hath pleased him. And he says, that is a good choice, Reverend. And the Reverend is staring at him like he's suddenly a little bit afraid. Like, he says that's a good choice, and then makes eye contact and has this, like, there's the Reverend just sort of scurries away at that point. So I guess what the Reverend is trying to do here with that, because what I'm taking away from this verse is I'm not part of that bit of violence, so I'm not part of the overall problem. But really, you are. Whether or not that violence is in your mind justified, whether or not it has something to do with what is right and wrong, it is still bloodshed. And so you're feeding into the overall atmosphere of bloodshed and vengeance in this camp. Y'all feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's what he's saying, and I feel like that's how Seth takes it. This is basically the Reverend trying to tell Seth not to take vengeance, and Seth looking at the Reverend and trying to restrain himself from punching this man in the fucking face, because that's the opposite of what he wants to hear right now. Saul asks him, are we open for business? And then he just walks away. Seth has no patience for anybody today, and I feel really bad for fucking Saul, because all he wants to do is open this hardware store, and Seth cannot keep his shit together. He's so angry. Like, he looks like he's about to fucking pop on anybody who should come and talk to him. You know, the whole thing is just the look that he has on his face. So he goes into the makeshift prison where they're keeping this dude. And the prison is a storeroom near where the pigs that are always used to eat human remains is. And the Asian man, who I feel like is supposed to keep people from going in to see this guy, watches Seth go in and makes no move to stop him at all. Seth could have easily killed this man, but I think the guy who is supposed to be keeping guard has decided that he is not. Mr. Wu, that is his name in this. Okay, Mr. Wu. I think he has, like, he's trusting that Seth is not the type to do it. So he comes in and talks to this dude. I guess, after bum rushing me to get out of your hardware tent. What is it he says here? I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. Bum rushing me out of your fine fucking hardware establishment. You didn't see this coming, did you? And Seth says, I halfway did, you droop-eyed motherfucker. I was born droop-eyed, all right? Which, like, the arguing about little shit like this is just, and who do you blame for the rest of the fucking mess? Let me ask you this, cocksucker. You think they know me in New York City by now? If you wasn't tied up, I'd kill you. So basically this guy's trying to be like, you were acting like I was nothing, and now I have a reputation for killing one of the most infamous men. And I bet that burns you up. And he is correct, because Seth grabs him by the throat at this point, clearly wishing that he wasn't tied up so that he could kill him. It is a scene. And as he's trying to strangle him, Seth has tears in his eyes, and fucking Jack calls him on it. What are you crying for? Did you love Hickok so much? Was your sweetheart? Did he stick his dick up your ass? And I felt for Seth in that moment, because there is nothing quite as frustrating as being deeply angry and also emotional, and so you feel like your tears undermine your anger. And as a woman especially, your tears are used to undermine your anger a lot. So I feel this in particular in a way. And he's like in the middle of like trying to fucking kill this guy when his lawyer comes in, McCall's lawyer. I love the way that Mr. Wu watches him as he leaves too. Like, I almost wonder if Wu wasn't hoping that that Seth would kill Jack. I don't know. I want to know about Mr. Wu though, like, frankly, right? He's what is his deal here? Like, I don't know. I feel like he's at such a disadvantage. It doesn't seem like he speaks any English either, which he may do, but considers it maybe advantageous to pretend he doesn't, because I could see when you are around a bunch of fucking criminals who are using you to dispose of bodies, that maybe pretending you don't know nothing is a better fucking place to be. I'm sorry. Patrick responded, "My take, Seth can pretend to not have a role in the community, to not have a part to play as a member of the body of the camp, but he does and needs to realize it." Okay, so that's similar to what I was saying, except I was taking the particular tack of playing a role regarding the violence, but you just mean playing a role overall because this community like kind of needs a leader and he's not really stepping up in any way. I don't really know that he has the clout to step up right now because he's only been there a couple of weeks. But I do feel like, God knows I wouldn't want to be the one to step up with fucking Al Swearingen wielding the power that he does and the money that he does. I wonder what kind of role this fucking Reverend has in mind. How to play a member of the community. So then we have this scene with his lawyer. And the lawyer is going to play an angle here of maybe Bill Hickok killed your brother. And so you were killing him as vengeance, as an eye for an eye. Which evidently in this era is like enough to acquit someone. Because that's later on said in the court, like, if you believe that this to be true, then you know that you must pardon him. And I was like, oh, really? We do know that we must pardon him? Okay. Like, apparently a man has a right to take vengeance. It's like very literal here. And it just drives me nuts that he takes that. And he does get exonerated, but it's only because Al doesn't want the mess of having to deal with an actual trial and an execution based on the trial, due to the fact that the whole point of Deadwood is that we are not part of the government and we have no governing body. We are an illegal settlement, essentially. And if we try and act like we have systems of government and laws and anything resembling an organized system here, they're going to take notice and they are going to come down on us and ruin what we have all got going here. So it's in their best interest to let this guy off and then kill him themselves at some point on their own. But to try and, act like they're doing it in the name of justice, that's setting a precedent that Al cannot abide, which I find fascinating. This never occurred to me that this would be a problem. I did wonder about it last episode, how they were going to handle this in light of the fact that they do not have a government. And I can't help but wonder if they're not going to be like facing this issue again at some point, because it doesn't seem like this is going away. It doesn't seem like the next time if somebody gets murdered, they're not going to try and have a trial again. He didn't end trials, is I guess what I'm trying to say. He dealt with this one particular guy, but I feel like this is going to come up again. And I don't know how he continually ensures that things don't go down the way that people are used to, i.e. a trial. Because, you know, people cling to that sort of thing. It adds a feeling of order, and that's very comforting to everybody. Like, it's one of those contradictions. People are here because they like the fact that there is no law and order. But also, having law and order makes everybody feel comforted and safe in a way that they also crave. So how do you fucking, like, you know, how do you deal with that? And in the end, we have that scene with Seth where he's like, well, I'll get to that because we have the funeral first. I'm going to talk about Cy Tolliver here and Joni. Because Joni tells him that Andy is sick. And Cy decides that this means we got to get rid of him. This is so sad because he says to take him to the hills, and I did not take this literally. But it is very literal. He wants this man, his servant, whose name is Bart, to take Andy and literally dump him in the middle of nowhere. And he tells him to burn the blanket as well. Because if anybody finds it and brings it back into town and it's full of fucking, like, virus and bacteria, it can infect everybody in town. Spoiler alert, Bart does not follow all the instructions here. He does not burn the blanket. And I can't help but wonder if that's not going to come back and bite everybody in the ass. Because as much as I appreciate a bit of, what's the word I want? I guess a bit of mercy on Bart's part. I also feel like it would have been merciful to just shoot the man in the head because he is clearly not going to get better. This is a man you've left to die. Just admit that's what you're doing, that he's not going to get better, that you're not leaving him with, like, any real medicine, you're not informing the doctor of what actually was going on with him. Shoot him and have done. But he doesn't. He just dumps him and leaves him for Jane to find, because Jane is wandering around in the woods drunk because of her friend being killed. And Jane tries to sort of, like, care for this man. Jane is really a one for taking in, like, stray people, huh? Because she took in that little girl, but abandoned her once it seemed like that girl was stable. And now this guy is in a bad way, and she's sort of, like, taken him under her wing, too. And initially, she was practicing a good amount of caution, I felt, in that she was not touching him. She was keeping her distance. She was willing to, like, pour some booze into his mouth or water into his mouth, but she wasn't actually having any physical contact. But then later on we see her and she's, like, wiping at his mouth and his face with a damp cloth, and that's contact. She's touching something that touched him. So I'm concerned about Jane getting sick here. The whole way that goes down, I just feel really bad for Andy. I feel so bad for Joni, too, because she doesn't want it to be dealt with in this manner. And Cy does not give any fucks what Joni wants. He couldn't care less. And the fact that she decides to go to Wild Bill's funeral later, he attributes to her having, like, a crisis of conscience because of how they handled Andy, and that she wants to go to church to feel absolved of her participation in treating Andy the way that they did. Which I don't think he's wrong about. I think he's dead on. But then there's a really weird scene later where she's bathing one of the sex workers, and he sticks his head in and sort of, like, in a derisive tone asks her if she got enough church, if she's got her, if her praying made her feel better. And she, like, looks him dead in the eye as she starts to make out with the woman that she's giving a bath to. There's no desire there. There's no... I don't know what she's trying to do there. If she's trying to give him a fuck you, or if she's trying to be like, I don't even care, that's not what this is about. But it's a weird scene, and like, I feel like it's the kind of thing that a lot of guys would be like, ooh, two women making out. But it's so angry and devoid of any sort of passion or desire. There's just rage there that it feels really creepy and, like, unpleasant. And I kind of like the fact that the show is showing Joni as being just as complicit in the oppression of these women as Sai is, by taking advantage of this woman. Because it's really easy to put all women in roles of, put all women in the same category of oppression, but there are varying levels even within an oppressed group. You know, like in the black community, if you are light-skinned as compared to other black people, you have a level of privilege because of that a darker-skinned black person does not have. And she is a woman who is like at the right hand of the man in charge. She is oppressing these women with him. Don't get me wrong, that does not mean that she is not part of the oppressed group as well, and that he wouldn't cast her to the side the minute he needed to, because that's what he is, a man who clearly does not have a lot of regard for women, period. However, she still has some power here. And it was a weird moment that I don't know I understand. So, okay. That whole thing goes down. Let's see. Let's talk about the scene with the doctor coming to confront Sai about this whole thing, because I can't tell you how much I fucking love the doctor and the way that he decides to call Sai out on his shit. It's beautiful. I love the doctor so much. Okay, so he comes in and he looks up at room 8 because he's coming in to, he thinks, check on this guy. And there's no guard outside the room. The door is open. And he comes over to Sai and is just basically like, what the fuck? And Sai says, room 8 left. And the doctor says, born by angels. And he just says, you don't have to worry about that anymore, Doc. Just put the man in room 8 from your mind. Sir, I have no vaccine for the sickness the man in room 8 didn't have. The closest place that does, to my knowledge, is Fort Kearney. If you want a remedy, the epidemic you have no reason to believe will break out, I would send someone right away. And Sai says, I hear you loud and clear. And he pushes it. Will you send someone? And Sai says, if I do, you'll be the first to know. And the doctor loses his fucking temper and punches the fucking barrier between the two of them, because Sai is behind like a grate at this point, and says, if you don't, and I have to, that will be known to every damn person in this camp. And then gets out of there. And I am like, all fucking right, Doc. Because look, Sai offered this man, this doctor, like triple his going rate, practically, for the same job as Al. And yet, it makes no difference to the doctor that he's getting paid that much by this guy. He is still gonna be like, if you allow a bunch of people to get sick and die because you didn't want your fucking business to go under, guess what, motherfucker? I'll bring it under. I will grab it and pull it down with me, because you might be angry at me, but the damage will be done and you won't be able to fix that shit. So guess what? Take care of it. And I was just like, oh, because Doc is just not fucking here to play. People are going to get ill and die, and that is no fucking game. Let's talk about this weird scene with Joey, because Sai convinces this dude, Joey, to fuck this woman. And I don't know who Joey is or why I'm meant to care about him, but Sai convinces him to get with one of the hookers. For some reason, he's like really interested in this dude. Gets the other guy that works for him, Eddie, out there to like testify about how this woman is like the best he ever had. And then later on, we hear them talking, and Eddie just admits like, oh, well, I never slept with that woman, so I was just lying. Weird moment. I feel like I'm supposed to give a shit about Joey, but I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to care about here. All right, so trying to make sure I cover every scene because I'm running out of time here. Oh, let's talk about fucking EB, because EB has just about run out of patience, my friends. He has been, I don't want to say implicitly loyal, because I feel like that's giving him a kind of credit that I don't really think he deserves. EB is at least smart enough to look out for himself, effectively, right? And EB is starting to really realize that maybe supporting Al in all things isn't going to profit him the way he thought it was going to profit him. And he is in one of his hotel rooms scrubbing fucking blood up out of the floorboards because people, for some reason, just don't want to sleep in a room somebody was murdered in. Call them crazy. And he doesn't want to have to drop his rates. So he's trying to get rid of the blood stain on the floor. Guess what? Shit don't come out. You're going to have to stain that entire floor or get a rug or some shit. Oh, he's sending Joey to Fort Kearney, which is in Nebraska. Patrick, when he said, have you ever had Nebraska pussy? I thought he was talking about that there was a woman who was from Nebraska in the brothel. And he was just saying, she's from Nebraska. Nebraska pussy's the best. Go fuck this woman. That was not clear to me at all. If you had not just said that, I would not have realized that was what was going on there at all. Thank you, Patrick. I completely misunderstood that. Okay, so he's sending him to go get the vaccine so that everybody will not fucking die of whatever plague this guy was carrying. Okay, cool. Well, good. I'm glad he's fucking doing something because Jesus Christ, bare fucking minimum. But yeah, EB is talking to himself about whether or not this whole thing, this alliance that he has going on, actually profits him anything. And he comes to the conclusion that even if it does, it's not enough to justify the shit he has to go through, which I tend to agree with. The question here is what he's going to do about it. Because it's one thing to come to that realization, and it's another thing to come to the decision to actually do shit about it. And Al is so fucking paranoid as it is that I can't imagine what sort of low-key, resistance he can make against Al that Al isn't going to sense immediately and get out of proportion paranoid about. He already almost killed EB because of the deal that EB was making with Cy Tolliver. So all he has to do is be caught pushing it one more time and he's out. Al's going to kill him. So whatever he chooses to do, he's either going to have to do it and fucking book and get way out of the reach of Al, or he's going to have to be so incredibly subtle about it that Al doesn't pick up on it, which I don't feel is within EB's wheelhouse. He's not a subtle man. He's not. He's good at taking orders and he can come up with his own ideas sometimes. But as far as being the mastermind behind something like that, I don't see it. So I'm a little concerned about him because on the one hand, I would like somebody to resist Al a little bit more than they are. But I'm not sure EB is the man for the job. I'm just going to say. So, all right, let's talk about, I'm making sure that I've got everything covered. We have the scene with the trial and then Al talking to the judge, the magistrate, and frames the whole thing as if, oh, I had a dream that these vipers, fucking Al, how could we let the big vipers know that we didn't want to cause any fucking trouble? The whole thing is just really, Al is something, man. He really is. Isn't there a simpler way of not pissing off the bigger vipers? And the judge throws back the shot that he had previously ignored, which I feel is an admission that he is on Al's side in this, that he's he's picking up what Al is putting down. And so frames the whole thing when they go back out there as well, you've got to let him go if you think that what he says is true. And they all do. All right, let's do the funeral. The funeral is just such an uncomfortable mess. I really feel for everybody who was there and for Seth. But most of all, I feel for the Reverend who's just doing his fucking best, the best he can. and nobody really seems to respect him. We have the guy who works for the newspaper sneezing like a maniac out here. It's the Reverend is obviously trying to speak to Seth somehow here. They've all been made to drink into one spirit, and they've all, let's see, for the body is not one man, but many. He tells us the eye cannot say unto the hand, I have no need of thee. Nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of thee. They much more those members of the body which seem to be more feeble, and those members of the body which we think of as more honorable, are all necessary. He says that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one to another, and whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it. I believe in God's purpose. I don't know what to think about what he's exactly asking. I feel like he's got to be saying, don't give in to your impulse here, Seth. But one could also read this as like leaving this man in the community who damaged everything is also dangerous. Like you could read it, but Seth looks so angry. I ask him, moving in me to allow me to see his will. I ask him, moving in others. And he says this and makes direct eye contact with Seth to allow them to see it. This is the angriest funeral. I swear to God, everybody's so upset. And they start to sing. And this is when Jane comes up and like stands there and watches the funeral, but she doesn't come and get involved in it. And the singing is so like uneven and strange, and they're all singing at different tempos. It's a really like awkward, strange thing. And as they're like leaving the funeral finally, Seth obviously kind of just wants to be like left to himself at this point. And the Reverend doesn't want to leave him alone. He is following them, trying to still like talk to them. Apparently Seth has just got word that they have let the guy go that murdered Bill. There's just so much anger, guys. I like the look on his face as the Reverend comes and starts talking to him. You took me into the body of the camp. I'm from Vienna, Austria. I may ask Mr. Bullock, what you feel now may be your part. Can't say I know what you're talking about. I would not want to impose. It's been given to me to ask. Fine, then you've been done what you've been given to do. What does he... he's got to be trying to keep him from killing him. He knows, right? That's what Seth wants to do. But Seth finally turns to him and is just like, all right, we need to walk on in silence. I'm not letting you talk to me anymore. Like, he has just completely lost his temper here. I am very curious about what winds up happening here, because at the end, Seth goes on up to Saul and tells him, I may have to get out of here in a hurry. And if they're after me, because I killed that man, I'm going to need a bag. Would you mind packing a bag for me? And Saul's like, no problem. I'll do it. And then the end of the episode, he comes riding up and grabs the bag and takes off. Which leads me to think he must have killed Jack. But I don't know. And I'm out of time here. So I kind of am going to have to leave this where I'm at. There's a lot to cover in this episode. I've been too chatty is the problem. And I should mention that Jack is warned. Jack is warned, should it ever be your need, gentlemen, this is what the newspaper man is saying, Merrick. Should it ever be your need to kill a man, then let us toast together the possibility that our trials be held in this camp. And he says that in this way, like he's sort of damning Jack in this way, like you're only lucky that you got away with it because of where you are. But Al comes up to Jack then and tells him, there's a horse outside. You need to fucking run because somebody is going to kill you. And it might be me. I don't know. Somebody who gives a fuck about my right and wrong. And Jack sort of laughs and then says, I don't run from nobody. But then he gets the fuck up out of there. So I guess we'll see. Guys, I don't know. And it ends like with things very undecided for everybody. I'm not sure what Seth did. We have the widow drinking her tea. We have Jane out in the woods still with this man who's not quite dead. Everything is like a mess. Ugh, there's a lot. So thank you, Patrick, very much for commissioning this. There's going to be another episode on Tuesday, so I'll be able to watch the next one pretty soon. I went over time again, so I hope that whoever comes next for Grace of Kings, I think that's Kyle, will forgive me for being late. And thank you all so much for listening. And I hope you've been enjoying it. I'll see you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.